here, I can feel my diaphragms. I feel a bit more aware of how I'm breathing after that lovely session with Vidyamala. Really interesting, wasn't it? So I've got that. Oh no, I won't tell you what's going on with me. You just notice what's happening with you. So where are my thoughts? Where are my feelings? How are my feelings? My body. And the contact points we mindfulness teachers often use. So the points of contact between the feet and the floor, the bottom and the chair, or the stool or cushion. So that's the body settling down. Gravity drawing us down. And then the body rising up. The body does that as well. Spine rises up. So rising on the in-breath, settling on the out-breath. Okay, and I'm going to suggest we now make another transition. Moving our fingers, our toes, that sort of thing, rolling shoulders, if that helps. So that was really short. And that's partly because I want to do a few little settling things, and then I'm going to do my talk. Now, the next settling thing comes with a health warning. So if you got any kind of physical vulnerability or incapacity, don't do this. But otherwise, I invite you to stand, right? And if you're, I want to just say that thing about physical vulnerability. So Vidyamala, don't do this, okay? All right, but if you feel fit and able. Now, this is, don't like that one. Okay, I have to do. So what I want you to do is give yourself a little bit of space. And from standing, I would, instruction is to stand on one leg now. So raise one foot off the floor. And I don't want to see any wobbling. I don't want to see any, I want us to try to be completely, perfectly still on this leg. Okay, I'm just looking around, I'm seeing a little bit of wobbling there. So completely still, perfectly upright. Okay, and now switch to the other foot, same thing. Poised, stable, unmoving. Okay, that's the first part of the exercise. Now the second part of the exercise, we go back to the other foot. Stand on that one again, and now I want you to wobble as much as you can. Okay? So whatever wobbling feels like, as much as you can without falling over and doing yourself an injury and suing Adhisthana, let alone me. Okay, wobble. Okay, are you wobbling? Right, let's try the other foot. Okay, wobbling. Not falling over, wobbling. Are you wobbling? It's good, I like it. I like what I'm seeing. Let's have the gallery view, please, James. Everyone wobbling. Are we wobbling? Okay, that'll do. Right, I'm back. Can sit down now. Okay, so we did sitting completely upright and still, standing on one leg without moving. How are we going to do this? Right, could you, I just want to ask you a little bit of feedback would be helpful in the chat. Could we do this in the chat? And maybe I'll pick on this. So what was it like? What did you notice? What do you notice when we're doing the completely still thing? And what do you notice when we're doing the wobbling thing? No one's written anything in the chat. Oh no, it's all going wrong. It was easier to wobble. Good. Thank you, Linda. Anyone else? Was more still when told to wobble. From Cheryl. Corinne and Arthur, I still wanted to move, and when wobbling, wanted to be still. Wow, there you go, Corinne and Arthur. Calm, then energy. Focus, then distraction. Fixed, free. I cheated in not wobbling. Akasha Nandi, really? You're leaning against the surface. Okay, I forgive you. More difficult to stand still when you told us not to wobble. Wobbling quite cheered me up, says Linda. Vimala Chitta, it was more fun wobbling and impossible not to wobble when supposed to be still. Right, okay, thank you. That's great. Thank you for all those chat comments. I think you know, you do these teaching things and you've got a teaching point in your mind, and that was it. Thank you. So what is, do you remember those things? In England anyway, we had weebles. Do you remember them? You have to be of a certain age. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. In fact, we've got one somewhere. Here's my weeble. Right. Okay. So weeble. So it comes back upright. It's not really working on my hand, but you get the idea. You can't knock it over. Okay. They come back to stability. And what this stands for is an attitude that we can take. Actually, we can take the whole of our lives. We can certainly take it to meditation. And I think it's a helpful attitude to have in doing a retreat at home. So even the word retreat, it evokes something, doesn't it? It evokes, you know, it comes from the French word, which means to withdraw. We get away from it all. We're in ideal conditions. Have you ever heard those announcements at Buddhist centers where it's as if someone wrote a script. You say, well, we go off to a retreat center or somewhere in the country, and we're in ideal conditions for meditation. And I'm not really sure that that's true, actually, because we bring our minds with us, which is not ideal conditions because our minds aren't perfect. And why should we require ideal conditions to practice in any case? Now, there are obvious answers to that. And I do go on retreats myself in retreat centers. And I regret the fact I can't do it at the moment. But there's an opportunity in doing this new hybrid phenomenon, which is the retreat at home. And that is about bringing these two worlds together. I think very often we can have two lives, two meditation lives. The meditation that we experience on retreat, And we can very easily think that's the quotes real thing. And then there's the meditation off retreat. And we sometimes hear people say, well, it's just maintenance. I'm just keeping it ticking over or something like that. Have you ever heard people say anything like that? Yeah. All right. Maybe we've said that ourselves. I think I've probably said those things myself. So in these conditions, we know that lots of things will be present for us that are the things we might try to get away from when we go on retreat at a retreat center. So maybe there are emails coming in. Some of them might be to do with work, and maybe you have it in mind that you'll be doing some of that through the day. I'm not saying that's good or bad. Those of you who have children, I've got a 11-year-old son, will know that, I might be on retreat, but he isn't. And his life won't stop. The childcare element won't stop. I mean, fortunately, my wife is doing most of that this week, to the extent it needs doing. But do you see what I mean? Those things won't stop. Now, I could regard those things as distractions, as things that will take me away from what I really want to be doing. So that's one opportunity. That would be like the let's stand on one leg without wobbling thing. I want it to be perfectly still because that is what mindfulness looks like. Or I could say, no, that's all the wobbling stuff, all the things that are going on in my life, the imperfect things. So I don't know about you, but when I do that wobbling, I notice that, like some of you are saying in the chat, it's not worse. In some ways, it's much more interesting. It's enjoyable, it's fun, and you find, or I find anyway, that my body seems to I'm not particularly coordinated physically, but even my body seems to have the capacity to counterbalance and sort of dance a bit. Did you experience that? Yes. It's like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to keep myself in balance, even when I'm wobbling. So I didn't introduce myself this morning because we ran out of time. But I want to just give you a little story that is relevant to the theme, and it is about how I decided to become a mindfulness teacher. So I think it was 2002, I wanted to do a solitary retreat. I'd been working in the FWBO communications office and editing Dharma Life with Vajrasara. Hello, Vajrasara. And actually we carried on doing that, but I'd carved out time to get away. I went to India where I did some writing work. And then I wanted to do a retreat, a solitary retreat in Asia. And I thought that would be the place to have an idyllic sort of exotic experience of, in the ideal conditions. Eventually, I found somewhere in Sri Lanka which was a retreat center that was set up by a youngish man called Analio, who at that point wasn't a bhikkhu. And he lived most of his life on retreat. In fact, all of life effectively on retreat. A lot of meditation, a lot of study. And he'd set this place up to support himself to do that. And there were retreat huts all around. But it was outside Kandy in Sri Lanka. So it all sounded great. And I got there and I looked out over the view and it was palm trees across a distant vista. It was fantastic. But at the bottom of the hill was one of the busiest roads in Sri Lanka. And actually, all around it was sort of like a suburb. And there were people in their gardens playing, listening to their radios and, mowing the lawn and all that sort of thing. And I was really disappointed. So, well, I tried another place and that was just the same. In fact, it was worse. And I started to realize that Asia is not a quiet place anymore, on the whole. So I sort of struggled along, and I went to see. I talked to Analia about this. I was saying, I'm finding the noise really distracting. So I was sitting there in this kuti, this concrete furnace. I mean, it was really hot in Sri Lanka, and I was sitting there, and I said, it's just so noisy. So he said, okay, here are some earplugs. So I went off and I put in the earplugs, and I was still bugged by all of the noise. So I went back again, and he said, okay, here are some headphones. So I went back to my kuti, was meditating away with my earplugs in, my headphones on. They were bright green headphones, and a lungi. That's all I was wearing because it was so hot. I'm sorry, it's not a very appetizing image, I know. And it was still noisy, right? So I went back to Analia and said, look, what? This place is so noisy, Analia. And he said, right, Vishvapani, when I do meditation, I do two kinds of meditation. When I do samadhi meditation, I put my earplugs in. And when I do satipatthana meditation, i.e. mindfulness practice, I take my earplugs out. So that's what I did. I took my earplugs out. I took my headphones off. It was still hot. I didn't take my lungi off, you'll be pleased to hear. I kept, I just eventually embraced the fact that this was not this was not going to be a quiet retreat. And actually, of course, it worked, and it went, my whole experience. In fact, I think that's probably one of the strongest retreats I've ever done, is for me. And, very, very vivid, the images and the memories of that. So that's an image that we can take, right? And my recommendation is that you take this week as a retreat with earplugs out. Yeah, this is an earplugs out retreat, because we're not in these supposedly ideal conditions. So embrace the fact of what's going on, bringing awareness to that. Mindfulness is really very simple, as I think Vidyamala and Nagabodhi and Vimla and Sona and I all do. It's very simple, just about being present with what's happening. Now, what that means in our experience probably isn't simple. It's not boring either. But that, the meaning, the richness that unfolds from just coming back to what feels simple. And that's often what I say to people when it starts to get a bit complicated, as the people are getting a little lost in their experience. What feels simple? What's there in our experience that feels simple and feels clear? And we come back to that, and often it's the body. It might not be. So what this speaks to is a tendency that I think is pretty much pervasive in our culture, and which the psychologists who worked with the mindfulness people to develop the kind of thing that we do have identified as being a key driver of things like stress and depression and anxiety. It's what they call discrepancy monitor. So the discrepancy is between the way things way we think things ought to be, yeah, in my meditation practice, in my life, in my mind, and the way things actually are. So I think when I am doing a meditation practice, I should be concentrated. All this is inverted commas, right? I should be concentrated and present all the time. The fact is that I'm not. And what does that mean? It means I'm getting it wrong. And why am I getting it wrong? Because I'm not good enough. And then, we start comparing ourselves with other people. And so there's discrepancy between me and them. But in a way, the other people are just part of this imagined ideal that we have. This is the way it should be. Now, sometimes that, so, and the secondary suffering all ramifies from that discrepancy. Okay, so this is the thing to look out for with this kind of approach. Noticing when we have that idea, things should be like this, but they're not like that. And then we start to come up with explanations for why they're not, why I'm not good enough. When I'm teaching mindfulness course, I'm sure this is true of the other mindfulness teachers here, we work with this all the time. So for example, the body scan, I now teach the body scan I say to people, I don't know what your experience was doing it today. I thought Vimalachita led it beautifully. But I say to people that this is an impossible practice. It's impossible to do the body scan and follow all of the instructions that are given. Now you feel this part of the body. Now you feel your left toe and your buttock and I don't know. And you stay with it all the time. That's the implication of it. But if you were to really set things up so that you could actually do that, for one thing, you wouldn't be lying down, because lying down is all about letting go. And when you let go, you drift and you might even fall asleep. So we set people up in the body scan to fail. So this is one of the differences maybe between the way breathworks people work and the way MBCT people work. I'm an MBCT person, mostly. So we work with that fact of failure. We work with the fact that people get frustrated by doing the body scan because they can't do it. And it's a different kind of effort that's required, a different kind of presence, which is not about being perfect or thinking you have to get everything right. And I really think this is worth looking at in our own attitudes, in our ideas. I remember when I was just learning to meditate, I was convinced that the meditation teacher knew what was going on in my mind. Anyone ever had that? You sit there and you look around the room and everyone else is completely concentrated, clearly. So there's an element of comparing myself with them. And I'm not. I'm the one who's getting it wrong. And then the teacher says something like, and what was that? So that's how we access a sense of calm. And maybe they then give a talk on the 4 dhyānas or something like that. And I was sitting there feeling like I was a fraud, but hoping I would get away with it, except that I thought that the meditation teacher would know because they could probably read my mind because they were so advanced. I'm sorry, I am now much more experienced than that meditation teacher, and I can't read anyone's mind. Not even my own, actually, as it happens. So, right, I'm just going to make some suggestions for how we can do this on the retreat in the course of the week. So there's all the material that we'll be giving you, but I think it'll be really interesting to explore bringing mindfulness into our daily lives. So I know that some of you have actually been doing a whole series of online retreats all the way through lockdown and so on. This is actually the first time I've done one. So I'm going to be doing this, right? I do it a bit anyway. And I teach this material. So there are 3 areas I'm going to suggest. The first one is habits. Okay, so this is an opportunity to notice our habits. When I say that, who's feeling uncomfortable immediately? Yes, I have habits. We all have habits. Now, I'm not going to suggest that you change your habits over the course of this week. All we're going to do is bring awareness to them. So I've sometimes done courses, follow-on mindfulness courses for people around habits. And I say to people, just notice where you think there are habits, that things that you're not completely happy with. And generally speaking, the two areas that people identify are things to do with food and things to do with devices. Yeah. And that's because, well, it's obvious, isn't it? Devices are designed to ensnare us and they make us addicted to them. And food, and especially when you're at home. I hear a lot of people saying, oh yeah, I've put on weight through lockdown or on furlough and so on. There's just all that stuff lying around ready to snack on. So, these are quite loaded areas. And what I'm going to suggest is we just notice what happens. So, for example, with food, no, I won't give that example actually. With devices, just notice what happens when you find yourself, I'm just going to, what is it you check? Is it your messages? Is it some kind of game? Is it the news? So what happens? And look out for the judgments. Look out for the judgments that says, look, I'm a bad person. I can't, I'm meant to be this Buddhist, mindfulness, whatever, but I keep looking at my phone all the time. Just look out for that judgment. All we're going to do is notice the judgment. Okay? I'm not going to judge the judgment because that's where it starts to get complicated again. Just notice the judgment and maybe ask, what do I need? So there's some kind of need which is being met or we're seeking to address by looking at our phones, grazing on snacks. What is it? What do I need? One thing I notice with the devices thing is that I'm working away on my computer. Maybe I'm doing a Zoom thing or something else, and it stimulated me in a certain sort of way. So then I stop working and I go looking for another form of stimulation because that's the mode I'm in. So I'm hungry, not hungry for a snack particularly, I'm hungry for stimulation. So anyway, that's me, but just check. Now, a second area that we can bring awareness to is if you're living with other people, just bring awareness to your relationships. Any patterns you notice? Any tendencies? And again, really, really notice the judgments that come in. Here I am, I'm meant to be on retreat, but I'm getting irritated by my husband, stroke wife, stroke son, stroke daughter, or dog. I see a dog in one or two of your rooms. Anyway, actually, people don't get irritated by their dogs in quite the same way. But, in our relationships, just noticing. And when I say noticing, I mean noticing my thoughts, noticing my feelings, noticing how that shows up in my body. When this other person in my family says this, I find it a bit irritating or difficult. How does it affect me? I'm not suggesting that our relationships are all bad either, and that all that we're going to notice is the difficult things. But we're not trying to change anything with this kind of approach. We're not trying to change anything. We're just being curious about our experience. And the last area is appreciation. So the home is very familiar to us. And we cease to notice our environment. I can't speak for your experience, can I? I'm just generalizing because I think these are natural human tendencies. One of the things we do on mindfulness course, and this is both breathworks and MBCT, is mindfulness of a routine activity. So I'm going to make this a suggestion. So some of you will know about this, some of you won't. But what we do is to take something that you do every day, like cleaning your teeth, having a cup of tea, maybe a particular walk, shower, that sort of thing. And what we do is we simply make that an opportunity to be aware. So if we're cleaning our teeth, which is a very popular one, by the way, and very good for your dental hygiene to do this. So if we're cleaning our teeth, then it's just being aware of cleaning our teeth, the physical sensations. And it's as simple as that. It doesn't mean you've got to take longer over it in the kind of Thich Nhat Hanh style of, one dish at a time. It just means, but if you notice that you're hurrying, then there's a choice there. If you rush through cleaning your teeth. Okay, so that's something we could do, and that's kind of anchors, that's a way of bridging from this kind of Zoom-based practice to something that we will keep on doing after the retreat ends. The other thing is noticing our surroundings, just noticing, look at the pictures on your wall. Look at the objects. Look at the flowers in your garden, if you have a garden. The things that have become familiar to you. I mean, there may be certain things that you generally love and appreciate. Just notice there are other things that you tend not to notice. Okay, so habits, relationships, appreciation, that's quite a lot, isn't it? But we'll just notice those things as and when they arise. Good, so I haven't gone too long over. So let's finish there, my little talk. Take a mini break, I think we're calling, and we'll come back at 8:10, and I will lead a 20-minute meditation, which will be a meditation of imperfect people meditating imperfectly in an imperfect way. Okay, so that's it. Looks like the Dalai Lama has joined us. Can you see? Dalai Lama has joined our retreat.
Well, that's Cheryl with the Dalai Lama. Wow. Cheryl's obviously met the Dalai Lama.
It's not actually the Dalai Lama then.
No, it is, and that's Cheryl.
Well, it
Cheryl's
might
got.
be him. Maybe he wants to learn mindfulness.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
He's quite a fan of mindfulness, isn't he?
I think so.
Secular mindfulness. Yeah, he is. So I believe.
I think he's a fan of anything that helps suffering beings.
Yes.
He's a big church kind of man, I think.
Big tent.
Big tent. Yes, that's
Big
the correct
tent.
terminology.
The broad church and the big
Broad
tent.
Thank you. Good voice. Good to have a literary person on the team.
I will edit your quips.
Yes, very good. Very good. Correct me. Quite right too. People are in the chat. People are asking what MBCT is and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Then someone said, as opposed to MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. I wouldn't say it's opposed. It's more that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy was a development of MBSR, particularly developed for people experiencing recurrent depression.
Yeah.
Is that accurate, what I've just said there?
It is accurate. They aren't very different at all. I mean, effectively, it's just tweaked a little bit.
I meant they're different, they have similarities.
Yeah, and MBSR stands for mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is the... Oh, so is that a question, Cheryl, about distinguishing MBCT and MBSR? What's the relationship between them? Is that right?
Now, what happened to someone else? Someone had asked, what does MBCT stand for? Someone had said mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And then Cheryl said, as opposed to MBSR. And then she said, they're different, they have similarities. And I just wanted to, I'm not correcting you, Cheryl, it's more fleshing it out. But it's, my own preferences when we're talking about the mindfulness field, we don't sort of pit one thing against the other, but they're all designed to help suffering beings in particular groups, as it were. So, like breathwork's developed out of working with chronic pain, MBCT working for people with depression, but they're all based on the root of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which was the first program developed by John.
I mean, I talked about the MBCT because I was talking about the discrepancy monitor, which is very much a sort of psychologist's term, and is based on clinical experience of people work like Mark Williams working with depression and all the findings. So we're not just in the dark about how things like depression develop. You know, we're drawing on decades of research and all that kind of stuff. And that's, you're kind of bringing mindfulness. So it's quite interesting to identify those little insights from psychology, which name things that we can really use in Buddhist practice. So that's one thing that I really like, discrepancy monitor. Okay, so let's get into it again. So I invite you to sit. Now I'm going to read a poem in the course of this. We're only going to be a short meditation now. It's going to be 15 minutes. I'm going to read a poem, and this is a poem by Wallace Stevens called The Poems of Our Climate. Now, one of the, how can I put this? Usually the poems that we read in mindfulness courses are of a certain sort. They're sort of modern poems, often American poems, that are very self-explanatory, and they name certain things which are helpful to have named. So this is a different sort of poem, but it's about, I'm just going to say that it's about, imagine everything was absolutely perfect and beautiful, and then the thought is, Oh, hang on. No. So it's about what it's relevant to the talk. Actually, I'm going to read that at the end. So now I'll just get into it in the way that I was talking about. So what happens when we come to sit down? Is there a certain way that we hold our body? Okay, I tend to do this. I tend to do that. Shoulders back. It's actually quite helpful, but it's a habit. Okay. So in this moment, for you now, what will help you settle? Maybe that's stretching, maybe it's standing, maybe it's moving. You could do this. I'm going to lead a practice, but you could do the whole thing standing if you want. You can move around. Yeah. So just noticing the habit. Also noticing if we have any habits around how we settle. Okay. So we often do what the mindfulness schools people call fofbok, feet on floor, bottom on chair. But however we do it, that's bringing our awareness to contact points. So, is that right now? Another way we can think about this is moving from thinking, we've had a talk, to sensing. That's helpful. So how can we connect with our senses? So maybe feet on floor and bottom on chair. Maybe that will help. And I'm not thinking about those things, just sensing, feeling, experiencing. So what helps me settle? And what do I notice? What do I notice in my thoughts? Of course, there are thoughts. Having the input of a talk, if nothing else, stimulates thought. So how have those thoughts impacted our experience? Is there a kind of quality about thinking? Is it images? Is it stories? Is it ideas? Is it scattergun assortment of thoughts just popping here and there? How about feelings? What do we notice with thoughts or feelings of the body? Noticing as well when the thought comes in, oh no, that's not right. Just feeling, experiencing, just an opening to that more emotional side of our experience. And let that bring us to the body. So is the body settled? Where's our energy? Do we experience particular areas of intensity? Other areas of dullness? Where there are tension drawn? There are pleasant feelings? Are there unpleasant feelings? So there's lots and lots of suggestions I've made. And I'm just going to just sit with our experience and just noticing what arises, and how it changes. Just noticing, not judging. And the breath can be an anchor. So a ship or a boat that's on the sea, well, it can drift anywhere in the seven seas as the current takes it. But a ship that has dropped an anchor will be tugged by the currents, but will stay in roughly the same place, bobbing around within the diameter of the anchor's chain. So the breath is an anchor. Currents take us one way and the breath tugs us back. As it flows in, as it flows out. Checking in. Feeling the anchor, the chain tugging us back. Poems of our climate. A poem about perfection and imperfection. Clear water in a brilliant bowl. Pink and white carnations. The light in the room more like a snowy air reflecting snow. A newly fallen snow at the end of winter when afternoons return. Pink and white carnations, one desires so much more than that. The day itself is simplified. A bowl of white, cold, a cold porcelain, low and round, with nothing more than the carnations there. Say even that this complete simplicity stripped one of all one's torments, concealed the evilly compounded vital I, and made it fresh in a world of white, a world of clear water, brilliant edged. Still, one would want more. One would need more than a world of white and snowy scents. There would still remain the never resting mind, so that one would want to escape, come back to what had been so long composed. The imperfect is our paradise. Note that in this bitterness, delight, since the imperfect is so hot in us, lies in flawed words and stubborn sounds. So just sitting for a few more minutes with the never resting mind. And making transition. Your own way. So I've been talking about all the ways in which this isn't a retreat. At the same time, let's remember the ways in which it is a retreat. So embracing whatever happens, noticing all of the things that happen at the time we're not on Zoom, our habits, our relationships, opportunities to appreciate our environment, but also staying in touch with what we're doing in the retreat sessions. It's like opening the door from the meditation practices and the teaching into our daily lives, and opening another door from our daily lives into the teaching sessions. Okay. Good night. We're going to stop there. Some of us are going to stay on the course. We won't end this session. The team we're going to stay on, but for everyone else, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Joshua.
Night all.
Night, Veg Sarah.
Bye.
Night, John Boy.
Sona and I were thinking that we could actually leave this and we sent round the personal Zoom room for our team meeting. I think that might be better, and then James can clock off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So if we